Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I was very glad to look at your work and see that most of you have completed the last lesson activities successfully. And I was also very impressed to read some rather interesting and thorough answers to last week's question. Let's keep it up, okay? I don't want to see any decrease in quality. You're doing a great job. Let's continue like this. Now, as we did last time, to complete today's lesson, you will have first to watch this video and or read the transcript, which will contain all the information you need to answer the questions in the Google form. Okay, don't send me papers or photos. Do everything in the form. If you have troubles accessing it, let me know and we will find a way. But in general, please fill the form. Now, to get an even better explanation of what I'm about to tell you, I would advise you to watch the video on the Weimar Republic in the channel History Matters, which is linked in the transcript, and to read the articles in the online resources section, also in the transcript. Now, if you have any doubts or questions, as always, feel free to email me or write a comment in the assignment, as many of you did last time. Now, let's jump back to the 1920s. In the previous weeks, we have looked at three countries and how the First World War affected them. So we looked at Russia, which underwent a catastrophic revolution and turned into a communist state known as the Soviet Union, shortened USSR. Then we looked at Italy, which went through a deep economic and social crisis and eventually turned into a fascist dictatorship ruled by Benito Mussolini, or as many of you wrote, Benito Andrea Amilcare Mussolini. He did have a lot of middle names. Again, if you were not there for the lesson on fascism, look it up, let me know, and I will send you the resources, okay? And last time we looked at Britain, and how Britain was affected by the war. Britain that had suffered unemployment and the lack of housing, but still sort of managed to maintain form of parliamentary democracy. Now, for this and for the next lesson, we'll look at a country which went through a social, political, and economic roller coaster of crisis, recovery, and then again crisis, until all that instability turned into a terrifying and ruthless dictatorship. We're, of course, talking of Germany, and now it went from empire to republic to Nazi dictatorship. In particular, today we will look at the German Republic, known as the Weimar Republic, since it was declared in the city of Weimar. Berlin was too dangerous. And we will see why this new republic failed to stop Germany from turning into a Nazi totalitarian hellscape. This lesson will look at 4 points. First of all, at the transition from empire to republic. Then we will look at the economic troubles, then at the social problems, and finally at the political problems. I will not go too much into detail. I want you to understand the general picture, okay? You might have noticed, by the way, that there is a little arrow, okay? Let's show that again, going from economic to social to political. This is because many historians, including myself, believe that most of Germany's problems were caused by its economic troubles at the end of the war. Okay, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves and explain how Germany changed from a republic to an empire. Now, if this was a proper YouTube channel, I would have a segment here with a transition, but it's not. So, section 1, from republic to empire. Germany used to be ruled by a Kaiser. Okay, Kaiser means emperor in German and comes from the Latin word Caesar, which the Germans read as Kaiser. And the Kaiser was named Wilhelm. Now, Kaiser Wilhelm, since he had lost the war and lost it terribly, he was kicked out of the country. Or rather, more precisely, he agreed to leave before the others kicked him out. And he spent the rest of the life in the Netherlands as a grumpy old man who just kept complaining about kids these days not wanting German emperors anymore. In his place, the leader of Germany's political parties got together and wrote a constitution. Now, what is a constitution? Very simply put, is the rule book for a country. It's a big book detailing how a country should be run and by whom and why. Often, they lays down the main values of a country, who should be president, how the parliament works, this sort of things. Okay, so they got to this town of Weimar and founded a new republic. What is a republic? A republic is a form of government in which the people elect their representative to a parliament and let them take the important decision. It's more or less the same as a democracy, but contact me if you want to know a bit more about the difference that I believe exists between the two. Now, this is very subtle, so they're pretty much the same thing, effectively. Since this constitution was written in the town of Weimar, it is known as the Weimar Republic. What were the problems of this Weimar Republic? The first form of troubles were, as we said, the economic troubles, okay? Germany, after the war, was in a terrible shape. It's difficult to put it in any other way. People were literally starving. Remember the problems, the lack of food Britain had at home during the war? Well, Britain had an empire feeding it. Britain had ships bringing food. Germany hadn't, okay? Those same problems were at least 10 times worse for Germany, okay? And most importantly, the big three, which were, I'll give you 3 seconds to think who were the big three of World War One. Okay, they were France, Britain, and the United States. They agreed to blame the Germans for the war and ask for reparations. What are reparations? Reparations are a huge fine which is meant to repay the damages caused by the German army during the war. Okay, and since Germany had been blamed, they had to pay all of these reparations. However, the cost of this reparation was huge, completely outside the possibilities of the German government, okay? They tried to ask for an extension in the deadline, they tried to ask to be able to pay it in smaller bits at the time, but the French would always say no, and ask Mr. Green for the meaning of the word no. Now, one day in 1923, the Germans found themselves unable to pay the monthly installment of the reparations. They simply didn't have the money. And as a response, the French occupied the wealthiest part of the country, a place named the Ruhr, using it to get the share of the money, okay, that they were owned by the Germans. This made the German economy go through an absolutely enormous economic crisis. Now, people became poorer, money lost its value so much that it was used to light fires because money just was worthless. A loaf of bread costed something like 1 billion Reichsmark. It's a complicated thing, but when these sort of things happen, it's not good for anyone, okay? It was an overall disaster. We're talking mass starvation level of disaster, not there being enough food for everyone level of disaster, okay? The German government was able to fix it after a while, but then another even worse economic crisis happened in America in 1929. You might have heard of it, the economic crash of Wall Street in 1929. And all of a sudden, Germany was down the drain once again. We're talking 6 million people out of a job. We're talking mass starvation once again. And we're talking about a government almost completely unable to put a stop to it. So, to sum it up, what were the economic troubles of Germany? Germany after the war had become an extremely poor country because of the reparations it had to pay. It had a series of economic crises, went up and down, and then very down. And the government just could not stop them. They tried, they made some bad decisions, but even if they'd taken the right decisions, it would have been extremely difficult to actually fix the situation. What happens when a country goes through a strong economic crisis? There are social problems, okay? As people become poorer and poorer, and as soon as they see that the government is unable to fix the situation, society becomes unstable. This is called social instability. Now, if a country is unstable, it means that things are not going very well, to put it mildly. People started looking at extremist political parties, okay? So parties that were against the Republic, okay? They wanted to destroy the Republic. Those were the extremist parties. And they promised to fix the situation by getting rid of the Republic altogether. Now, there were two main kinds of parties. There were dozens of them, but we are talking about two main areas. We're talking about the communists to the left who promised to make Germany a heaven for workers by kicking out all the rich people who, they believed, were keeping the country hostage. They also wanted to abolish private property and have the state own pretty much everything. Okay? This is an oversimplification, but this is more or less what the communists wanted in the 1920s. Then, on the right, you have the nationalists, okay? The nationalists believed that Germany had been betrayed by a Jewish conspiracy, which was, of course, false, and wanted to get rid of all foreign influences, of everyone who they saw was not German enough or was going against Germany. They were very xenophobic. They were against any foreign cultural, economic, and social influence. And they were in favor of rearming Germany, of making Germany a strong military power again. And possibly they wanted to start a war against their external enemies, which eventually they did. Now, these two parties hated each other, okay? They both tried to stage a revolution and a counter-revolution. They shot each other in the street, and they generally stirred trouble all over the country. It was an absolute disaster for more or less a decade. Now, once again, as with the economic troubles, a lot of people saw that the German government of the Republic was unable to put an end to this violence, okay? They tried, they failed, and so people said, you know what, maybe those extremists are right. Maybe we should get rid of the Republic. Maybe we should join those extremist parties, which were, as we said, the communists on the one hand, and the nationalists, including the famous Nazi Party. Now, to sum it up, the second point, social problems. The economic crisis, which we talked about before, led to social instability, with extremist parties fighting each other and taking advantage of all the confusion to become stronger by asking to get rid of the Republic altogether. This leads us to the third point, the political problems. Now, social instability resulted in a fragmented parliament, okay, because people stopped agreeing on the most basic decisions on how to fix the country, and therefore everybody voted a different political party. It's a bit more complicated than this. Of course, everything is more complicated than this. I'm trying to keep it understandable. Let me know if you want to know more, okay, about any of these issues. I will be very glad to answer to your questions. Now, the German parliament, which was called the Reichstag, had, to put it mildly, too many small political parties. Now, think of the British parliament. Our parliament has something like 4 or 5 parties, 2 of which are the big ones. You got the Labour and the Tories, and then you got the Lib Dems, the Greens, UKIP, and those are pretty much all the parties I can think of. There is the SNP in Scotland, but it's in Scotland. So yeah, 4 to 6 parties, but there are 2 big ones that, you know, fight each other. The German parliament had about a dozen, twice as much at the very least. And making all these political parties, which were so very different from each other, making them agree on anything was an almost impossible task. And when people in parliament are unable to agree on anything, nothing gets done, and the country gets much worse. So, once again, this inability to make decisions made people lose faith in the system, okay, in the Republic. And a lot of Germans began to think about, yeah, you know what, this Republic is good and all, but it just doesn't work. Maybe we should join the communists, or maybe we should join the Nazis. And one of these parties, one of these extremist parties, the Nazis, was led by none other than Adolf Hitler himself, who, taking advantage of the many weaknesses of the system, was eventually able to take power in 1933. We will see that next time, and turn Germany into a Nazi republic. Again, we will see what that means for Germany and for the entire world, because of course Nazis means Second World War. We'll get there next term. But we'll see that next week. Now, to sum it up this third problem, the economic crisis caused social instability, which in turn made the German parliament unable to take the decisions required to fix the country. This allowed the Nazis to gather supporters and rise to power. So, here was the very, very essential outline of the period. Remember to answer the questions in the Google form, and don't forget to like and subscribe, or more likely, don't forget to let me know if you have any questions, okay? See you next time.